it will be my preference that my kids love everything I love. And so if I'm excited about something, I will try to get them interested in it. One of those things beyond engineering would be exercise. I think it's really important to take care of your body, especially your cardiovascular health. And there was a time that I was really overweight. And when I say overweight, I mean, actually, I was fat. And this is probably 20 years ago now. But, at the time, I decided I really should do something about this overweight thing. I should start exercising. So I did. And it turned into a lifestyle. I began exercising regularly with an emphasis on cardiovascular training, but I was also doing weight training and I was eating better. All of that culminated in me becoming much leaner and healthier. But the reason I'm telling you about this is because my youngest son, from an early age, showed an aptitude for physical activity, for running, sports, that kind of thing. Even though I tried to get all of them to go jogging with me and to exercise and whatnot, he was the only one that really wanted to do it. He would go jogging with me even when he was very little, and I would be surprised at how the capacity of those little legs to keep up in some situations. It was really impressive. But unfortunately, we eventually had to stop running because I was experiencing some serious heel pain that turned into some pretty big bone spurs, enough pain that I wasn't able to run anymore. And eventually it got so bad where some days even just walking would make them hurt, and that led to surgery. And in fact, I made a short video about this on my other channel, and I'll put a link to that video for you if you want to learn more about what's going on there. So for several years now, we haven't been able to take up this activity that we had started to bond over when he was very young, and frankly, I missed doing that. But after having surgery, I started looking for new ways to get back into exercise because a lot of that had fallen off just because there was so much pain involved. Most exercise was very difficult unless I was just doing bicep curls or something, and that's not really exercise in and of itself. I mean, it's a exercise, but you know what I mean. So I decided just on a whim, I could go swimming. And that would take all the pressure off of my feet and really all of my lower joints because you're, floating in the water, but you still can get some cardiovascular exercise. So I decided to take up swimming. Started canceled my gym membership at the place I was going, signed up at a new place that had a pool, and what do you know? Now I got a thing I can do. And I started going almost every day. And then one day I remembered that me and my son used to do this thing together. And I walked in the kitchen after coming from the gym. He was sitting there and I said, "You can swim." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "You can start going to the gym with me and we can work out together." He was like, "Okay." And just like that, I got a workout buddy. So it was so great to have him come to the gym with me, and he's been coming very regularly. And this is one of those things where I'm looking for volunteers only. I don't want to make my kids do this kind of thing. I will always make them try it. I have done that before, but exercising is hard enough on its own. I don't need to drag people who don't want to be there along with me. So I'm only looking for volunteers, but he's a volunteer. He's down for it. And it's amazing. Such a great opportunity to hang out together and talk. And it's not like we're like chatting it up the whole time. I'm not that talkative personally. Sometimes we ride all the way to the gym and back and we barely say anything on the car ride. But we do have an opportunity. And similarly, getting in and out of the pool and stuff like that, there's a transition time where we're together. And so there's a bond being created, being together even when we're not talking. But there are opportunities to talk. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. There's one other thing I want to say about this going to the pool that I didn't expect, which is the effect it has on other people. These older people especially, but some young people too, would see us at the pool and they would come up in comments and say like, "Oh, it's so good to see father and son like doing something together and exercising in the pool." They'd be so excited. Be disappointed when he's not with me because he doesn't go every time. They say things like, "Oh, he almost beat you yesterday. Where's your son at?" On and on. And listening to them talk, it almost seems like this is a highlight of their day. I mean, think about the emotional value that was created there completely unintentionally. And I hope that you'll hear this and think maybe, that's worth something for people in my community. I mean, I already had my own intrinsic motivation to do this without that, but now there's an external motivator where I can see this spillover effect on other people. Not to mention the added benefit of building up this relationship with your kid, whether it's son or daughter or whatever. You can take swimming lessons together if you don't know how to swim and get started like that. Of course, it can be another activity. It doesn't have to be swimming. In fact, we do some weight training as well, and it's going to depend on the kid, right? You may want to choose something with a lower physical requirement. Maybe you just want to go walk at the park or even just through the neighborhood and get outside and look at some trees instead of sitting on the couch. If you lower the bar a little bit, you might get more volunteers, is what I'm trying to say. So let's get back to the conversation part, because there's more happening than us just riding in the car together. We also have some interesting conversations. And at first, I would just play music, on the ride, and we talk about basic things like, I don't know, video games or whatever, because what teenage boy is not into video games? And the conversation would mostly be pretty light. I recently got the bright idea to play an audiobook instead of playing music. Now, I don't listen to fiction usually. I'm listening to something pretty serious most of the time, because those are the kinds of things that capture my interest. For example, I've been listening to this series on hostage negotiation, and I decided, he's old enough to hear what's going on in the world. And so I started playing the audiobook. And in this book, they're talking about all sorts of, really serious crisis situations, right? Like people are desperate and they're being held with guns and lives are on the line. But we're also talking about how the situation was resolved, what the negotiator is doing to stay calm, to manage the situation, what the hostages are going through, and how they might be managing the situation. And so this brought up a lot of interesting conversations for us to discuss, that everything from how to deal with a crisis emotionally, maybe you're not trying to talk a person off of the ledge from committing suicide or from holding a hostage, but you're going to have a crisis in your life, probably more than one. And also just the fact that some people are just shockingly evil. And it's amazing the things that our fellow human beings are capable of. I think it's good to have that in the back of your mind, that even though we expect most people to be reasonable, rational, kind, things like that, we still have a human capacity to do some pretty atrocious things. And just being aware of that is helpful to know that in your life. So we're listening to one hostage situation where there's a gentleman holding his wife, her sister, and her children hostage in a train car. And they're going back and forth. The guy in the train car only speaks Spanish, and so that they need to figure out how to get through this language barrier. And they bring in someone who's not a hostage negotiator, but he speaks English and Spanish, and they're trying to figure all this out. And there's a lot of discussion about how stressful and how difficult this is. They want these people to survive, and they're having trouble communicating, and it's dangerous, and it's hot, and all on and on. So at some point, I paused the audiobook and I told my son, I said, sometimes it's helpful to remember just how difficult the situation can be for a police officer when you're trying to enforce the law and make someone do something they don't want to do, but it's your job to make them do it. And the situation is bad, they're having a bad day, and things are just rough. I went on to tell him how when I was younger, I used to be a firefighter before he was born, and I went to a lot of horrible situations, right? And people have died, or family members have died, or people are deathly sick. They were just in a car accident, their house is burning down. These people are often having one of the worst days of their life. And I told him that that's something I used to always keep in the back of my mind. If somebody seems to have an attitude or is a little bit rude or whatever, that I'm meeting them on a day that's, one of the worst days of their life. And then my son, without any prompting at all, he jumped in and said, yeah, and when you're a police officer, you're the reason they're having a bad day. Everything was fine until you showed up and wanted to take them to jail. And I just thought, sometimes they'll surprise you just how insightful your kids can be and the things that they can say. And we went on to have a wonderful conversation, which I won't try to retell all of it here. But it was really interesting to talk about. And then he went on to bring up things like, how much they get paid and on and on. And I said, actually, I don't think I would want to be a police officer, even if they were paid a lot. If they were paid as much as a medical doctor might get paid on average, I still wouldn't want to be a police officer. Like you're putting yourself in very dangerous situations and you're frequently forced to compel people to do things that they don't want to do with force. You have to be the right kind of person to want to do that. And even more so, there's a difficult blend required where if you're going to be good, you need to have a certain amount of restraint and patience, but also desire to enforce the law. I don't know that they all have that, and I won't try to describe what all that takes to get there, but I find that to be challenging. And I think you have to have a certain kind of personality to want to do that kind of job. After we got out of the car, I started thinking we should do this again. Like I stumbled into this kind of haphazardly. I had already listened to this audiobook before. Maybe I should pick an audiobook with him. We listen to the whole thing together and, stay in sync with each other. Since we're going to the gym almost every day, you don't have to wait very long to hear what happens next, right? Like this could work out pretty well. I think it might lead to a lot of really interesting conversations. Really, the whole point of this is just to facilitate conversation for us to bond together and get to know each other, right? To have as many low stakes conversations as we can. And when we need to have those high stakes conversations, we have that whole history to facilitate us being able to talk about more difficult things. This is actually something I've talked about many times before, but it's worth mentioning here again that you can't expect someone to suddenly want to pour their heart out and talk about something deeply personal when you won't even talk to them about their day or what they're doing with their life or, the things that they're interested in, those low stakes conversations. You need to have a lot of those in order to have the high stakes conversations. You need to have walked into their room many times before to talk about unimportant things. Because otherwise, if you only come in the room when the stakes are really high and they're about to be punished or something really deeply personal is about to be discussed, they're going to be all nervous and clam up and you're not going to get a word out of them. You should make talking to you normal. And then when it's normal to talk to you, it's not that much more difficult to go a little bit deeper. Okay, there's one more thing I want to tell you, and that is you should be working out. Exactly. You probably didn't expect me to say that, but here we go. Exercise is critically important for your health, especially cardiovascular exercise if you only choose one. You got to take care of your most vital tool, which is your heart. When that dude stops, everything else stops. Just show is over. So keep yourself healthy and you can be around to see your grandkids and not feel terrible when you spend time with them. Now, of course, aging is inevitable and so is getting sick for some people. Genetics, there are a lot of factors that go into this, but you can greatly increase your odds by doing something as simple as getting off the couch and moving your body on a regular basis. And it's hard to beat that argument, right? Eating better makes a big difference too, but let's take one stepping stone at a time. I won't challenge you too much on your apple pie. Let's start with going outside and looking at trees. All right? And take your kids with you while you're at it. Okay. Go be a dad.